Hello and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Engage Rocket webinar. My name is Chi Tong. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Engage Rocket, and today we're really excited because we have such a, a wonderful experience waiting for you over the next hour and a half or so. So today we're going to be talking and sharing some good news. What we found over the course of COVID-19 from the months of circuit breaker, April and May, on to phase 1 and phase 2 of reopening. What we have found was a remarkably positive note in the data that we've been analyzing. And that story is the story of how the Singapore workforce through this period has been extremely resilient. Now, we partnered together with IHRP and SHRI to be able to bring you this research. And to date, and it will remain the case, it is the largest consistent data set on the Singapore workforce and the sentiment within the Singapore workforce since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. So we're very, very excited to share with you today some of the key highlights from the research and the white paper that has been released and that many of you already have. For those of you who may not be familiar with Engage Rocket, we are the fastest growing people analytics software company here in Southeast Asia. And we're very, very excited to work with many of our customers, and we're very privileged to work with more than 100,000 users across Asia Pacific. And today, apart from just sharing the research, we're going to be treating you to a conversation with 4 very prominent leaders in the HR field. Patricia, Daniel, Michael, and Sean, I'll be introducing them more later on in the panel, and you will get a chance to ask them questions about their experience, what they're seeing in their part of the HR space. Now, just a quick hygiene reminder for those questions, please use the Q&A button rather than the chat function so that you can ensure that your question does go through. And do click on the thumbs up button on the Q&A if you see another question that matches what you're hoping to ask, so that that question gets prioritized and we can then address it quickly. So today, this is what we're going to be covering. We're going to be covering the highlights of the research from the white paper that all of you have downloaded that paint a very compelling picture of the resilience of the Singapore workforce. As partners, we also have the privilege to have Alvin from SHRI to join us and share his perspectives, as well as Mayank from IHRP to share his perspectives as well on the research. Then we will move on to the panel and you would then get a chance to ask questions to the distinguished panelists that we have here today. So just a quick word about Engage Rocket. We've had the privilege of being featured in a number of different media outlets before and after COVID-19. And also we're very, very fortunate and pleased that our customers really like us and continue to recommend us both in the media as well as in forums that they are in. So a little bit about the study that you have in your hands, the white paper, the research paper. So this was conducted over the months of the circuit breaker, so from April all the way until July. So you'll be able to see that that trending of the data over time. We collected data from almost 20,000 respondents across 127 companies, and in total, they had 880,000 plus responses. We covered across all major industries, which was very good to see. We obviously had to segment them in a certain way so that we'll share some of those segmentations later. With a 64% participation rate of the sample. So 64% of all those who received the survey actually participated in these surveys. And what that allows us to do is when we calculated the margin of error at a 95% confidence interval, this was less than 1%. So what that means when you look at the data later is that for all percentage point data, any difference of more than 1% can be considered statistically significant. We will also analyze the magnitude of that difference and share with you some of the key insights from there. So these are the highlights. There are 4 areas that we'll touch on: well-being, infrastructure and how we can make it inclusive, productivity, as well as the recovery. How do we facilitate recovery within our companies? So let's start with well-being and the stress triggers that we see. One of the pieces of good news that we've seen is that mental health is actually improving over time, and fewer workers have been reporting stress. So it is already in August. Many of us have been working from home for a good 5, sometimes even 6 months already. And in some cases, we've not even met our teams face to face for half a year, which is a really, really long time. And on top of that, there's a lot of concerns about safety, a lot of concerns around the economy. And yet, we're finding that in the Singapore workforce, those that have reported to this question that they agree or strongly agree that their stress levels are still acceptable has actually increased and is maintaining a high level. So almost 6 out of 10 people are saying that actually they're doing okay during this period. Conversely, those who disagree or strongly disagree to this question has been falling. It's a slight rise in the July period, but again, this has stayed relatively low and is staying low. So this is really good news, and it's good news from a mental health angle from all of our employees in Singapore. One of the key triggers of stress, the main concerns that people report that they have returning to the physical workplace, has been the resurgence of the COVID-19 infection. So obviously now, the community cases have been staying relatively low, single digits over the past few weeks on average, which is very, very positive signs. And I personally am very heartened to see that. At the same time, there is that concern that many, many people have. Almost 7 out of 10 people are reporting that this is a concern for them. Another concern that almost more than half of the respondents indicated was that they were concerned with the compliance with safety measures, so social distancing measures, either from their co-workers or from themselves. So I'm sure many of you who have children will know our children are wearing masks to school all day long. They're learning to deal with it, but many of our employees who are working on site also are wearing masks and have to observe social distancing measures. And that is a cause of stress for all of them. So before we continue, I do have a quick question that I'm going to be posing to the audience. And you're going to see this appear on your screens. And it's just a couple of questions. It should be appearing on your screen very shortly. So if I could just urge you to respond to these questions, and I will share the results once all the responses are in. So the first question is, when working from home, the main challenge I face is one of the few. So please do go ahead and pick the top 3. And the second one pertains more with ourselves and the leaders that we work with. And the question is, the most important skill that leaders in my organization would need in this new normal is. So, well, the votes are coming in fast and furious. Thank you so much for those who have voted. For those who have yet to vote, please do take part in this little fun exercise, and we'll share that data shortly. So as the votes are coming in, I'm going to move on to the inclusiveness of the infrastructure that we have today. To what extent does this infrastructure actually support remote work and even hybrid or blended working, where we have some employees on site and some who get to work from home? So I'll pause here with this very busy chart that you would also find in the white paper. So you'll be able to go through this in more detail later on your own. But we asked one question that really shocked us as when we were just 2 weeks into this study. We were very surprised to see the results. Now 4 months down the line, it still continues to surprise me and is a strong indicator of the new normal ahead. So that question was based on my experience working through the circuit breaker and beyond. I can see myself working from home permanently. None of the time, I don't want to work from home. A quarter of the time, half the time, 3/4 of the time, or all of the time. So what we found was that 83% of the respondents actually said that beyond COVID-19, they want to work from home more than half of the time. So this was something that we got curious about and were wondering whether is this an SME thing or is it just people in large companies that believe so? And we found an amazing amount of consistency in the results. Whether you're a small company, mid-sized company, or a large company, doesn't make a difference at all to your preferences to work from home. We started to cut the data by industry as well. Does it make a difference? Apart from a few industries that have people reporting that they don't want to work from home at all, vast majority of the respondents conformed to this particular statistic. So this continues to be a surprise for me and a surprise to many people that we share this with as well. So before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to wrap up this poll of the audience. If you haven't already answered the questions, please take the next 3 seconds to complete the questions before I end the polling and share the results. Thank you all very much. It's more than almost 80% of people who participated voted, which is great. And here are the results. So when working from home, the main challenge that this group faces, the largest one here is being working longer hours than usual. Very, very interesting. And I'll share data that we've collected in July as well that seems to be consistent with that. The other main ones here seem to be access to resources and tools. So the inclusiveness of infrastructure within the companies we work with, 43%. Practical aspects, family distractions and so on, 46%. Communication among team members, 41%. Interestingly, 12% of people here say they don't face any challenges working from home, which is great. And only 9% say that they face productivity challenges while working from home. So very, very interesting results here. And on manager skills, we're finding here setting clear rules of engagement for remote hybrid working, 27%, but very much so evenly split across all of these different skills, promoting team bonding and social cohesion, and showing compassion and emotional support are very, very important to this group, which is fantastic. Thank you for responding. So the data that we've seen is remarkably consistent with that which we were tracking. So particularly when it came to working longer hours than usual, it seemed that, so these four bars for each of these items reflect the progression from April to July, April being the top bar, July being the bottom. And it seemed that when it comes to just the infrastructure and ways of working, those remain challenges for all of us while we work from home. Particularly access to resources and tools and the practical aspects and distractions that we have at home. Working longer hours than usual was an interesting one. We had 65% of us saying that that was the case. And that's very remarkably consistent with the respondents in July. There was a hiatus in May and June, maybe for whatever reason, there was some degree of adaptation and understanding, but it looks like now economic activity is picking up again and we're finding ourselves working longer hours than usual every day. Communication among team members continues to remain a niggling problem for about a third of us. those that claim that they don't have any challenges working from home, again, 12% earlier in this group, 13% in July for the overall sample, and poor productivity, likewise, very consistent with this sample as well. So we also asked the respondents if they had suggestions for their company to improve the flexible work arrangements. And these were the top 3 suggestions that we found. The first one was around flexible hours for greater convenience, whether they're working from home or in the office. Part of it coming out of greater understanding of, for example, parents or people with dependents who have to spend some time during the workday looking after them while working from home. The second one here is clearer communication on new policies and expectations, especially as things continue to move very fast in the business world and within our companies. We need to continue communicating clearly on the updated policies that we have. And finally, processes to encourage a more open culture to enable healthier workplaces. We had a large number of respondents actually thanking their companies for participating in this survey and asking for more avenues and channels to encourage feedback from their staff. Now, moving on to productivity and particularly training and digitalization. The great news is we've seen productivity increase over time. So when working from home, it takes me less time. It's now gone up to 23% of people who are saying that it takes them less time, meaning that they're more productive. And for those who say that it's taking them more time to achieve the same productivity as before, that's actually gone down to 29%. So very, very good news on the productivity front. And again, coming back to ways of working and infrastructure, this was what we saw as a difference for those who reported themselves being more productive. They were actually more able to work with colleagues who remained committed to quality deliverables while they were working from home. And they were more likely to have access to resources, the equipment, technology, support services, and so on that they needed to do their job effectively. So these are major drivers of productivity from an infrastructure and ways of working standpoint that we found. Finally, we'd like to talk about engagement and resilience and building that culture of resilience through a crisis like this. How do we get through it? How do we recover strongly? So we use the concept known as Employee Net Promoter Score to proxy employee engagement. So this is a measure of employee loyalty that was developed by Bain and Company. And it comprises segmenting the population into detractors, passives, and promoters based on this question: how likely are you to recommend this organization to friends or family as a place to work? So promoters are those that are highly engaged, highly loyal, good advocates for the company. The detractors, on the other hand, are less engaged. They're not happy where they're at, and they are very unlikely to recommend their company to others. So then the Net Promoter Score is just the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. So we found that one way to reduce stress and improve resilience is to improve engagement and culture. So what we found was that those who were promoters were twice as likely to be able to report that the stress levels are still acceptable. They were twice as likely to report confidence in the steps of their organization to address problems resulting from COVID-19. And they were twice as likely to report confidence in the future of their organization. And these last 2 items, confidence in actions taken today, as well as confidence in the future of your organization, are really important to ensure that we emerge from this crisis stronger. And the reason for that is because you want, as we take actions as leaders in companies today, we need the people to be with us, and we need the support of the people. And the only way we can get that looks to be able to engage them better. And how do we go about doing this? So we ran a multiple regression analysis on all the respondents across all the questions that we've asked. And we found that communication and care, again, coming out very strongly, drive engagement and loyalty, particularly in crisis. So effective communication has a very high impact on Net Promoter Score, as well as the level of support from the organization at all levels of the organization, including even the most junior managers and supervisors. While we're going through this period, managers and supervisors also have the responsibility to give clear and regular feedback on how well their team is doing their work. And without that face-to-face interaction and the ability to observe body language, this is all the more important a responsibility on every single team manager throughout the organization. So before I hand off, I do want to share with you something that we at Engage Rocket have also been working very hard to do following the results of this study. We found that helping companies to build resilience is something that we can do quite well. And we have worked hard to build a package that continues to support companies in Singapore and their efforts to build resilience. So I won't go into too much detail about this, but this is a way to access the people analytics and the full power of the Engage Rocket platform in a more accessible way than ever before. So you'll be able to get Singapore's leading pulse surveys through our platform, get powerful workplace insights of your own team, as well as access the most comprehensive benchmarks that you would find on the Singapore workforce in this area. And all of this for as little as the price of a kopi per employee per month. And this is very, very accessible. You can scan this QR code. The slides, please do request for slides later. Or if you want, you can also access the application link over here. So now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Alvin Goh, who's the Executive Director at SHRI. And he will be giving some perspectives from this study and sharing that with us. And then we'll move on after that for Mr. Mayank Parekh. So over to you for now, Alvin.
Hey, thanks, Chidon. Glad to be here with the rest of the esteemed panels and together with IHRP and yourself. So I think from this research, really what has got to me is that, for HR and as well as business leader, COVID-19 pandemic has definitely accelerated unprecedented change and has thrust HR professions into the limelight. I think more than ever, the health of businesses is urgently and visibly linked with the health of our workforce, as what we could have seen from the research itself. The HR community has gathered together very quickly to see through this previously unimaginable shift, where we together with our business leaders have adapted quickly to the current situation and also developed very unconventional ways to operate and cooperate as well. I think the key question remains then, how do we move forward in such uncertain circumstances as we are witnessing second waves of COVID-19 among our neighboring countries. And basically, questions has also come up to us, and when will all this end, right? Is work from home, virtual calls, and the long hours that we are putting in, as what the research was showing, about 60%, right, going to be the new norm itself. So with so many challenges colliding at once, many of us may be struggling to chart a clear way forward. We might not have all the answers right now, but from this research itself, clearly there are two key perspectives that I want to share. Number one, as HR leaders, the importance of ensuring that we remain purpose-driven. The war against COVID-19 has not ended. There is no peace treaty signed with this pandemic yet. And we still therefore need to continuously work hard and protect and together with our business leader to protect our workforce, to transform our workforce, help employees develop new skills and improve upon our work processes and procedures. With this stronger purpose itself, we should then pay attention to the needful. Although the data shows that the mental health being of our people are in control, but definitely from where I'm seeing, hairline cracks have shown and have appeared. And if these are not managed carefully, these hairline cracks will lead to worse outcomes, especially over the last 2 to 3 weeks, where we have recently saw the slew of retrenchment exercises being announced by various organizations. Therefore, I think we need to remain positive, and every step involves choices that will be tough to make in the months to come. We need to lead with a greater sense of compassion and empathy, and I believe these skills will definitely fortify and build resilience in the years and decades ahead. So these, I think, are a few perspectives that I'd like to share. Thank you, Chito. Over to you.
Thanks so much for sharing, Alvin. Now handing over the mic to Mr. Mayank Parekh, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for HR Professionals. Mayank, over to you.
Thank you, Chito. Very happy to be here. I think I won't repeat too much of what has already been said. Just want to reiterate that the pandemic just shows the power of the community. You know, when the circuit breaker was announced, advisories were not very clear. We saw a lot of activity within our community for them to come together, to share practices, and to learn from each other. And I think this is very positive for the profession, and we'll continue to do that. As Alvin said, we are not out of the woods yet. So I encourage each and every one of you to stay connected to your networks and to share. The other aspect of looking forward at how businesses are going to evolve is really more and more companies need to instill a culture of trust and empowerment within the organizations. And I think this is something that HR can play a big part in helping leaders. And by acknowledging that trust, by being present, productive, and bringing their employees, bringing their 100% to the company, I think this is an opportunity for companies to show that they are resilient in whatever that comes their way. So trust is a new currency that we are looking for in a post-pandemic world. And trust comes from three things: competence, doing things well. It comes from fairness, doing things in a fair way, transparency in terms of having information, sharing information with employees, and also listening to your employees in terms of what information can bring to the business and what can be taken advantage of. So I think I'm looking forward to hearing from our distinguished panel of HR practitioners in terms of not just how HR professionals can provide the support in companies, but also partner with leadership in order to build that trust and empowerment within their companies. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayank and Alvin, for sharing. And very, very good message there. Number one, like HR is being thrust into the spotlight as we address this pandemic. And secondly, building that trust and listening to what our people are saying, helping our leaders navigate this through. Very, very important lessons. Now, I'd very much like to introduce our privileged, we're very privileged to have this panel here with us, very, very distinguished leaders, all within the HR field as well. And I invite all of them to switch on their videos and so you can see them. I'll introduce them one at a time. So we first have Patricia from Sanofi, who's heading up the leadership development for that company here in Asia. Michael Jenkins, he's the Chief Executive Officer of Expert Humans. Sean Tan, who's the HR Director for Southeast Asia at Under Armour. And Mr. Daniel Chia, the Head of HR for Samsung Asia Private Limited. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, I'm going to be directing this question to all of you, and perhaps if I could invite Patricia to answer first. In your mind, what makes a resilient workforce? And what do you think that Singapore companies have done right in being able to foster resilient organizations? And before you answer, I'll caveat this for all the panelists. All the views that are expressed here are their own, and they don't in any way reflect those of their companies. So with that disclaimer, Patricia, over to you.
Thanks very much, Cheetong. So I think what resilience means to me is about resilience is meeting the unknown of the future. And you would need to meet that future with a combination of definitely 3 C's. 1 is definitely curiosity. 2 is about courage. And 3 is about compassion. And this is a whole new paradigm for learning within organizations and also for companies to feel responsible to be able to create the conditions where people can change their skill sets and also feel that they can change their mindsets. And the courage comes from not just individuals building their competencies, but also what they can do together as a team to build those competencies together. So I'm very glad that Engage Rocket is having this focus about resilience for companies and resilience for work, because I think that this is what we need to have for our people and also companies in Singapore or who are headquartered in Singapore for what they need for a fast changing world that they are in right now.
Thanks for sharing that, Patricia. Curiosity, courage, and compassion, we'll definitely remember those. Maybe if I can invite Daniel to share next. What does resilience, what makes a resilient workforce, and what do you think Singapore companies have done well to foster resilience in their organization?
Thanks, Chitong. In my opinion, I think really we talk about resilience is about embracing the change, accepting the change, and also adapting what is way forward. And I think that is also typically, fundamentally, the basis, of everyone in the organization. So definitely we are facing a very tough time ahead. And as a leader, as the so-called leader providing a direction to the organization, I think that part has to be clear so that everyone within the organization know the direction, the bearing to go forward. And being resilient is basically don't give up. I think in a very simple words, I think that's how I would put it. And I think what Singapore company has done well is despite the difficulties that we are facing, we had you can see that kind of resilient, the never give up, that kind of winning mindset, winning spirit we put together to overcome the difficulties. Be it you had to work from home virtually, you have to adapt to technologies. And I think fundamentally it's about the mindset. And I think Singapore organization actually has this very strong mindset of never give up. So that's something I've observed, within my HR network. And also when I talk to the other HR practitioner, I basically see this common characteristic among our Singapore company, which I'm very glad to see that in a way.
Thanks for sharing, Daniel. Moving on maybe to get your views, Michael.
Yes, thanks, Chitong. I think a number of things have been mentioned already, the aspect of trust. I might like to add to that honesty and being very clear with people about what the good news is and what the bad news is as well, and communicating with people often and clearly. I also see that successful companies have been able to create I think a very useful alignment between what the frontline managers are saying, what the HR managers are saying, and also the senior leaders as well. So there's a lot of alignment there, and that gives people reassurance. And what all of those things do, I think, is create a sense of what we could call psychological safety. So if you're a manager, if you say to your team, look, I don't really know any more than you do exactly what's going to happen and how this is going to pan out. But I'm going to be checking in with you. I'm going to be seeing that you're okay. And even the simplest of things, literally checking in with people to see that they're okay, that they're managing. All of these things I think are very meaningful to people. The other thing I think is really interesting about what we've seen in Singapore too is when we talk about resilience, the language of resilience is often around bouncing back and the notion of recovery. But I think the narrative that's been very useful is very much more around bouncing forward. In other words, leveraging these very difficult months that we've been through to look at things differently across a whole range of things and ask ourselves, you know, is there a way to do this better? So that's one thing. And the second thing I would add to that is, how can we take these things that we want to change and do differently and ensure that they can be sustainable over time? So people have mentioned compassion, people have mentioned empathy. I think these are great things and they're to be celebrated. I think what we need to try to do is ask ourselves the question, how can we capture these things such that we can use them in a sustainable way into the next era?
I like that very much. Thanks for sharing that perspective, Michael. Now, before, sorry, Sean, before we get to you, I just want to invite everyone in the audience to, if you have any questions, please do type them in the Q&A box. I invite everyone to type them in, and if you like them, or if you see a question that already addresses what you're trying to ask, do click the little thumbs up button. There's one question that's already the most popular question already, which we'll get to shortly. But please, if there are other questions that you can think of, please do write them there, and we'll touch on those really soon. Sean, so in your mind, what makes a resilient workforce, and what do you think Singaporean companies have been doing well to foster resilience in their organizations?
Well, to me, resilience is actually an innate quality or potential that organizations or people demonstrate during tough and challenging times, or what we say crisis. So to me, it's really about a mindset that we built over time to really respond effectively, efficiently to changes. And how do we embrace these kind of changes? How do we learn and grow at the same time? Or how do we even anticipate the future? So I think in the context of Singapore, we can draw a lot of strength and quality from the tripartite partnership that has been, very evidently strong between the Singapore government, the businesses, and also the unions. So that this unique proposition actually enabled us to build that mindset. I think more importantly, apart from the very generous financial aids provided by the government, more importantly, it gives a lot of confidence to people, to us, to organizations, to business, to say that, well, this crisis really, it's unprecedented. But I think if we really stick together in unity, stand together and try to overcome this, build a positive mindset, build resilience, we will ride it out. We will get through it. So I think this is some exceptional achievement that, I believe that Singapore has really done well in, if you compare us to other countries. And the fact that we keep talking about preserving jobs. And I think that is what the entire business community, including the government, the unions, have been talking about. And even in the last 2 quarters, we see numerous retrenchments, but we always talk about responsible retrenchments. And then moving forward, how do we have incentives? How do we want to grow, generate new jobs in the economy? So I think this is something that the government has really devoted a lot of attention to. And I think that in that sense, it kind of like cascaded now to a lot of people like us, working professionals, to say that, well, this is challenging, of course, but we will get through this because, and then I think this is how we also grew our resilience.
Yeah, I think those are very real bread and butter challenges, right? That we are dealing with. I mean, it's all very nice to talk about resilience in a academic sense, but this is people's livelihoods, right? That we need to protect. With that, this is a very, very popular question that's come up, and it's perfect question for this panel actually, as experts in the HR profession. So the question is, what can be done to equip HR leads to conduct sessions with employees and managers to understand their work from home challenges, as well as to develop their engagement model? So I'm assuming that this is what can be done above and beyond the kind of analytics that like Engage Rocket can provide, lah. but all jokes aside, right? This is like the hand-to-hand combat of HR, right? You're on the ground. How do you deal with employees, managers, and so on to be able to understand their real challenges and then being able to adapt and support them through that?
Chitong, maybe I want to try to attempt this question in a way. I think ultimately, like what you've been doing, the data analytics, and you've been collecting a lot of responses. In fact, I think as a HR practitioner, ultimately that's also the fundamental. You need to really hear from the ground. And it's just that now majority of us are working from home. So how do we really collect that kind of data point to have a sense in terms of what is happening? So in fact, you need to reach out, to a bigger pool. And I think in my organization, I rely a lot on my HR business partner. They are closer with the businesses in a way, and their roles and responsibilities are very clear. So they actually have a bigger outreach, to different staff. And for me, I would definitely work with my leader, my boss, and also the HOD, my peers in a way. So at times I do hear from them. And then, if there are opportunity that we are back to office, to assess the system, to attend certain function event, I will actually take the opportunity just, to have a quick catch up, what's happening to them. Because a lot of time, we have forgot about the leaders. Actually, the leaders during this period, we are also very stressful. We're also undergoing a lot of uncertainties in a way. So sometimes maybe at the HR leader level, we should also understand what kind of challenges they're facing. So basically, it's a two-pronged approach, not just only at the HOD level, but the other level using the HR business partner to get those data points. And I think when you consolidate itself, it's something very factual and it's very impactful. So I actually always feedback to my line manager regarding what's happening on the ground. And I think he always like to hear those feedback in terms of what's happening. And then from there itself, we can conceptualize, what kind of action plan we can put in place. It can be a simple thing that the laptop are not working. The staff are facing difficulty logging in, and the laptop need to improve. I think simple thing like back to basic, you just need to address that. And I think and that's what the staff really want. So it's not those fluffy thing, but I mean, you just need to fix those very fundamental aspects of things, and you can see the improvement, the engagement, in my perspective. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about this engagement part, because I think that this is a very interesting question, because it asks about, how do we develop a new engagement model? I guess all of us are still in the experiment. We're all trying to learn and experiment at the same time. In the past, when we conduct such a session, is usually done face to face. So what we are going to get used to, it's really about how do we engage people digitally, virtually, and how do we ensure that effectiveness at the same time. So I don't have a all one size fits all solution, because I think it works differently. But what I can share, for our company, for our organization, it's really digital training for our frontline staff as well as the corporate staff. And at the same time, we can, because now we don't see each other face to face. So I think that over communication, we can never over communicate. Right? So communications can be the form of emails and all that. So we want to stay connected. I think staying connected, it's one thing, and not just only for work matters, because you have so many meetings. You have work meetings with your departments, with your function heads, with your peers, with with your teams, and some with even regional portfolios, right? So apart from that, you probably want to think a little bit creatively on how do we engage. At Under Armour, what do we do? It's we actually launch digital workout sessions. We try to get everyone together for collective workout. It can be Tabata, it can be yoga. So everyone just lay out a yoga mat, and then of course you're staring into a laptop screen. It doesn't really, but you try to motivate. So we ask everyone to on the video so that we can spot check whether are you really working out or not. So in that way, I think it's something that we are still trying to experiment with, but I guess in some sense it compensates for that emptiness, working from home, alone, independently. And at the end of the day, we just want that connected to stay among all teammates. So something that I just want to add on.
Yeah. So I'll go next to just join the conversation, and just a quick recap. The question was, how do we equip HR leaders on this aspect? And for Sanofi, our experience was, I think, a lot of sharing among our HR heads, where we actually have a weekly call on how our countries are doing on COVID-19. And thankfully, also, we have our wonderful global colleagues as well. And we have a COVID-19 intranet site where, there's global communication about how Sanofi as a company would be supporting our countries. And some of these tips that's shared out with all HR leaders and all people managers are, getting the basics right in the first few weeks and months of COVID-19. And first of all, how are people equipped to work from home? And quick, like top 10 tips, including, on ergonomic, do you have a proper workspace setup? How's your chair? That's extremely important, in terms of how you're comfortable and effective for the 8 hours of the day or more. And also the well-being of our employees as well, in terms of mental and physical well-being. So are they taking, breaks and stretching and so on. So we had that, very importantly, that weekly sharing among HR leaders and with our global team that had the site with all these tips that's being released on a weekly basis. And it was really pivoting all the way from then when we started lockdown to now. And having, the employee engagement, all employee, all hands, and polling questions of employees, how well are you all doing? And for some of our countries, for example, our Singapore regional headquarters, to have a mental and well-being check-in, we actually had a psychologist come in to have a mental and well-being talk with all employees. And that was a very lively discussion. Of course, once you have an expert there, you can get advice on how you take care of your mental and physical well-being better as well. So those regular check-ins and pivoting all the way even until to today, to having creative ways of making sure our employees are well taken care of, even with expert help, is extremely important. And then I think the third aspect is we cannot forget about the social connections. And I like what Sean shared about, just even teams and employees exercising together is extremely important. For us, we experimented with meditation groups. So there was a colleague who actually put up his hand and said, let's try this meditation session. And if you like it, just continue on having these meditation sessions with me. It's 1 hour, and we try it out for a month. Every week there's a meditation session, and see how colleagues enjoy it. And other more social ideas that the employees themselves actually came up with was really amazing and creative. There was actually a team that had a virtual guitar concert, and one of the colleagues was actually very good at this, and the colleagues actually could have song requests, and he entertained, the colleagues, within the team. And another country heard about that. They actually did a concert fundraising. So everybody is sort of putting themselves to the next challenge. If they hear of an idea that's, very much for employee engagement and bonding, they take it to the next level and, raise the bar and keep raising the bar. So, but the social aspects and those very creative ideas about employee engagement are extremely important. And I think from our sharing experience, it's let employees be very creative and take their ideas and run with it, and sort of have a challenge that's going around the different countries. So that's the sharing that we've been having.
Chi Tung, if I might build on what Patricia shared, I think it might be an urban myth, but there was a Chinese politician who was once asked his impression of the French Revolution, what he thought of it. And this was back in the 1970s, and he thought and reflected for a while, and then he said, I think it might be too early to tell, right? Meaning that all of the phenomena that we're seeing now, work from home, for example, we've seen how Fujitsu, for example, in Japan has announced that fully half of its people will now be allowed to work from home as a matter of course. Twitter, Facebook, a lot of the companies have been very quick to say that we will now have work from home forever, you know, for those companies that really want it. And what's interesting to me is that it kind of flies in the face of a lot of what we know about human psychology, which is that people's self-esteem and the way they define themselves comes as a result of, amongst other things, having a pattern, having certain things that they do every day. So for example, when you remember the good old days pre-COVID, you might go to your local coffee shop, the barista knows your order, you might not know who they are, but they know who you are. All of these things create very positive effects in our brains. And I do wonder whether all of us are collectively putting a very brave face on a not ideal situation in terms of saying that, you know, work from home isn't too bad, or, you know, doing the best we can through virtual means is pretty much just like doing it, you know, in person. Whereas in fact, the emperor's new clothes is such that actually virtual is not as good as being together with other human beings. That's what I feel very passionately about. I think we're doing a great job as a human race, actually, to make the most of what we have and deal with the challenges that we have. But I do wonder whether, you know, if ever we see something, the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, it'll be very interesting just to see how much of the current way of working we actually retain.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think as social beings, but at the same time having to rely on technology, right? So we have our biological, like, social wiring in us. But at the same time now, because of safety, we need to stay reliant on technology. There's a question that came up about the increasing need and reliance on technology. So with that coming through, how do we manage leaders who may not be technologically as savvy, or maybe they might not even want technology, they're technologically averse, especially when they have staff setting up for them, usually. So sometimes you get the senior leaders who don't want to touch technology and get other people to come in and do it for them, and now suddenly they're at home alone and they've got to figure it out. Have you guys had to manage that? I don't know. Like, I'm sure Daniel, you must have had to manage that, and Patricia as well. And
well, I mean, my attempt to answer that question is really about the learning mindset, right? So I think throughout this conversation, we mentioned a lot about the mindset. Ultimately, it's also the results, right? If the leaders, you know, somewhat could get it done, get it set up, at the end of the day, he can have a video conference, a Zoom meeting. I think that's what really matters. I think in my organization, we face less of this concern. I think ultimately, we do embrace, you know, maybe coming from consumer electronic industry, we are quite well versed with all these technology. So not so much of a problem. I mean, I just want to share something that I had, you know, on the personal level. So I have this group of army friends that we've been together, we've known each other for more than 20 years. And, you know, I'm that sort of team friends that I will on and off say, hey, let's have a Zoom meeting just to catch up how's everyone is doing. And believe me or not, I mean, I have a army friends. I mean, he has a PhD, doing very well, but he do not know how to use Zoom. So what happened was he actually get his daughter that very well was with Zoom, with all those home-based learning, to help him to on the video in a way. So then ultimately, when you are put to the test, you need to get it done. I think not just leader, I think all human, we will have a tendency to find a solution. That's my opinion.
Sean, have you faced this problem, or is everybody under Armour all very youthful, very young, very technology savvy?
I would say in general, the most of our population are quite savvy. I don't really have to attend to so much of this as an issue. But I also felt that people now do realize the importance of technology, especially when they work from home, and how do you want to connect or communicate. So if we really don't know how to go about doing this, we better find out. If not, we'll be left behind. We talk about building a resilient mindset, gaining learning agility, and I think that is exactly it. Embracing that change and learning and growing along this journey. So I think this is what we always advocate, whether is it as a company or as HR professionals. So I think that is something for us not to manage, but probably advocate a learning culture within the organization.
All right. I've got more questions here. One that has been upvoted very aggressively. So, and this pertains with that phenomenon of us suddenly needing to work longer hours while we're working from home, even though technically in our workday now we have fewer hours spent commuting and so on. So the question here is, if we have line managers or even heads of department who do not draw lines between normal work hours and personal time. For example, sending WhatsApps to staff to complete a report at 5 p.m. and expect deliverables by 10 a.m. the next day, or contacting staff at odd hours to discuss work. How does HR manage this? And actually, I mean, my own question that I'm curious about is, how should HR manage this, or should HR be managing this? What do you guys think? Oh yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, Chee Tung, I was talking to a HR director only this morning, and she was sharing that she has a policy that on the weekend, nobody is supposed to send emails at all. And if somebody sends an email to her, she will reply, but she will say, this is not an emergency. Please do not write to me on the weekend. And she holds that line very, very firmly. So there's something for me around, I hate the phrase walking the talk, but actually modeling behavior. So that's one thing. If you've got a manager who writes to you at 5 p.m. and says, I want to have this report on my desk by 10 a.m. tomorrow, honestly, I would question myself as to whether I actually want to be in such an organization where the culture is not respectful of other people's time. So I think it brings up a whole range of wider questions. And it's, I think, a moral issue, if anything, for HR professionals to know whether they're going to line up and either toe the party line or to be the champion for the employees.
Patricia, have you had any experience in this regard?
So I think it's an excellent question that you're starting from the angle is that should HR even start managing this? And I kind of agree also with Michael, because it's really about the culture of the company. And even without COVID-19, if you have managers, sending messages to employees at 5 p.m. to give a deliverable by 9 a.m., the next day, it signals a lot about the culture of the place and what's being tolerated. So I would go into the angle of, rather than HR policing this, is to have the norms of the culture very, very clear. And I think for some organizations, they would state it very clearly in their values about respect for the individual, for example, care and concern and so on, perhaps in their cultural code or in terms of their shared company values. And I think it's also really important is that that people, managers understand on how to manage productivity and a high performing team. For us, besides, I think, sharing about, what our culture is, the other way that we encourage in terms of what are the norms is also through, especially during the COVID-19, we had programs about managing virtual teams. So in the past, maybe there are some managers who are managing virtual teams, but with the lockdown, almost every people manager is managing a virtual team because you don't have the opportunity to meet face-to-face. And we, through these 90-minute webinars about managing virtual teams, lay out the very pragmatic aspects for people managers to be aware of. And one of the things in the multinational is that about the working hours time zone. And, we are across 3 different regions. And for people managers who are managing virtual teams of teams that are across 3 different geographies, to be mindful of what are the working hours within that time zone as well. So those are the recommendations I would share that I think has worked for us. It's in terms of culture and shared values. And second is about equipping people managers about managing virtual teams much more effectively during these COVID-19 times as well.
Thanks for that, Patricia. Sean, did you have something to share on that before
Right. I guess there are 2 parts to this very good question. The first part is actually on time management. Now that with the work from home arrangement, work is officially integrated into our personal space. I think there's a greater need and emphasis on how do we want to manage our time and prioritize accordingly. So some work, for instance, like what Patricia has mentioned, right? We can't help it. We have to take global calls because of time zone difference. So you just have to manage that separately. The other important aspect, which I believe that all of us have been managing even pre-COVID-19, it's about expectations. How do you manage expectations of managers? How do you set clarity in terms of your expectations in terms of the performance deliverable? So that part, it's really a constant thing to me, whether you work from home or work in office, because even after you knock off, your boss, your manager may still expect you to, submit by certain deadline. So I think that part is done through constant dialogue and not just simply because, you work extended hours at home and that becomes an issue. So I just want to, really have a really quick point out in this case.
Thanks for that. Now, in the time, so I've actually known Daniel for quite some time now, and he's always struck me as an HR leader who really cares for his people, especially their mental well-being, their physical well-being, and so on. So I think this question actually is perfect for him. This one is one of the most popular questions currently, and the question is: with mental wellness issues in the workplace, how can HR staff support their own function, HR staff, and ensure that their own mental health is taken care of as well? I think you're the best person I know to maybe kick us off in answering this question.
Yeah, in fact, I saw that question in the Q&A, and it immediately remind me of a real encounter happened to one of my staff. So, before this whole circuit breaker, when the COVID situation was getting worse, then we started off by, there is a need to take temperature, of all staff entering the office. So I think it's always by default, that the HR team should take the lead. And we had limited resources, and I think including myself, immediately we implemented and activated the HR team, to be stationed at the building, the office building, before any staff entered into the office. We'll take a temperature checks. And then later part, I mean, indirectly, I get a feedback that actually the staff actually has concern. So we talk about mental well-being, and I think in this aspect, it's actually safety. I've been taking 100 over temperature. I could be in contact with a suspected case or confirmed case. I mean, what's going to happen to me? I have my families, etc. So that also, reminded me we are also human beings, right? So be it your HR team or not, safety, COVID can affect anyone, everyone. So what happened to the team? So I'm actually very mindful, and I think for us, unfortunately, we still need to lead by example. In fact, I myself was down there taking temperature myself. I'm also exposing to the similar risk, but I don't think that's going to help much. So I think what we can do is really, consider the human and human resource. How can we minimize? I don't think we can eliminate the risk, but how can we minimize? By maybe doing more frequent rotation. They're just stationed there for 30 minutes, then the new team comes in, so that the exposure time will be lesser. I think within my means, that's something I can execute, I can implement in a way. And I think about mental well-being, that's always a big topic. I always like to say the government was very successful in terms of war on diabetic, cutting down that kind of sugar intake. And I've been in my personal level, personal best in various event, occasion. I also didn't bring out, actually, we should have a global nationwide kind of effort and don't war on mental illness in a way. So we need to build the awareness, and then from there itself, we can actually take various, preventive action to how can we minimize it. And this mental illness is actually true. It's out there. A lot of people are suffering a lot from stress, and that also resulted in a lot of turnover. And you only get to find out during the exit interview in a way. So I myself is very concerned. So I think being a strong advocate in terms of mental wellness, be it we have been conducting a lot of virtual talk. I think to echo what Sean had mentioned regarding Under Armour, we partner with ActiveXG, to do whatever online virtual activities we can, organized talk that's related to mental well-being. I think most important is really to acknowledge that this can be a real concern, and how can we as a leader, put in that kind of measures to look into it. I think that's most important. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Daniel. I'm gonna actually start moving more questions through, because we've got a good number of questions here. So the next question is from Eileen. Okay, she's got quite a few questions here. Maybe I'll start with the first one here. What skills can an HR practitioner pick up or upskill themselves to build up on their resilience during this period and beyond? I feel like this might be a question for Patricia, actually. Would you be in a position to comment on this?
Thanks, Chi Tong, for the question. And I think it's an excellent question, not just for me on the panel, but I think the rest of our distinguished panelists as well. And we've been talking certainly about this aspect as well, because we're looking at the future of work, and HR practitioners need to be ready to be able to face about the future of work as well. And it's accelerated because of the COVID-19 situation. I think some of the skill sets for HR practitioners to certainly build up on their resilience here is certainly around, using a combination. It's actually more around the mindset. I think first of all, it's about their mindset, about being curious, taking the courage to face the unknown, and also about having a lot of compassion. So I think HR practitioners need to think about those aspects to be able to strengthen their resilience. And in terms of, I think, the functional areas for HR practitioners, then it's really about addressing on the future of work. And one of the very important aspects will be about digital savviness. I think HR practitioners need to take the opportunity to think about, how can they be digitally savvy to be able to meet the future of work. And there's a lot of technology that is coming our way to be able to help us, to support us, to be more effective, to be more efficient as well. And one of the key areas for learning professionals is about delivering the learning experience digitally and making it engaging, making sure that it's also very effective as a new learning experience for employees as well. So those are just some sound bites, I think, where HR practitioners can take good care of themselves, and is to really take the opportunity there on just supporting their own growth of their own mindsets, being curious, being compassionate, taking the courage to try new things. Then in terms of functional skill sets, thinking about being digitally savvy, I think it's going to be a great way forward for them.
Yeah, that's one of the, I think one of the bigger questions for us in HR as well. Actually, I saw one of the questions within the list as well. What kind of tools can, digital tools can HR leverage on to manage the teams during COVID-19? Have you guys any perspectives on those that you've seen?
So Jitong, maybe I can just share my opinion. So I don't think there's really one best tools that can cater for everyone. It really what really matters is what works. In my opinion. So again, let me share one story. Again, before this COVID situation, during Chinese New Year this year, so I was tasked to organize a Chinese New Year lunch celebration, to gather everyone. So that time we are still allowed, to have such a gathering celebration. So I have a task force consists of young members, that newly joined the organization, very creative, very innovative. So at my age, I would say, hey, let's form a WhatsApp group, to consolidate, to communicate effectively. So someone actually said, actually WhatsApp is not that the best tools. So she mentioned Telegram. So I heard about Telegram, but I have not really used it. So again, with the kind of mindset, I say, okay, let's have a Telegram groups in a way, and this works well, for the event. In a way, we are able to share a lot of information, data, slides, even video that is needed for the event. So what I'm trying to say is really choose a tools that works well with everyone, and everyone can relate to it. So it's not about just have the best tools and say everyone must use it. So that's again my opinion.
So if I can chime in, if you talk about the top digital tool, Chi-Tong, it's really Zoom. So we've hopped onto the Zoom bandwagon, and there's been short webinars on just for actually even all employees, not just HR, and of course people managers, how to get the most out of your Zoom webinars and your Zoom meetings, and use all the fun features that you can find in Zoom. So that's one top tip already, in terms of making sure you know how to use Zoom well, and know how to use it in a fun way as well.
Chi-Tung, I wonder also just how far out we would like to look, because I know that the technology is already here, for example, through wellness apps, for example, that people can get, whereby they can share their mood, literally what's happening for them in a brain activity type of sense. And it wouldn't take very much for HR, for example, to be able to have visibility on the brain activity of an intact team, to be able to measure or assess levels of morale and engagement, for example. Similarly, we do have the capacity to crawl through emails, for example, and have the ability to scrape the linguistic nature of those emails to be predictive of a mental ill health episode, for example. But it throws up an awful lot of ethical and moral issues in terms of what technology could do to help HR, to help human beings. Apart from all of that, just reflecting what Patricia said, I think there was a great report put out by the World Economic Forum 2018, which is looking at the world of work. And from memory, digital skills, technological skills was something like number 6, I think, in terms of the 10 most important skills going forward to 2030. But not far behind them, I think on position 7 and 8. 7 was leadership, 8 was emotional intelligence. And I do wonder, in terms of answering the original question, whether, you know, there's a job to be done for us to strengthen, support, and encourage our HR folks to experiment a bit on the EQ side. So, for example, one quick example: sometimes deliberately sharing something about yourself or making yourself vulnerable to another person is a way to build trust. That's something that HR people are always going to find very difficult to do, because they have the tension of being effectively the protector of the sort of rules, regulations, and governance of the organization. They have to tread a very, very fine line. So I think there's more that we can do, but also I think we should take our hats off to our HR colleagues and sort of recognize that they do an extremely difficult job, and currently even more so under extremely difficult circumstances.
Thanks for that. And I encourage everybody who is listening in this is a good opportunity for chat. I see some people already sharing some best practices. While we're all on the call with each other, there's a large number of people on this call. Do take this opportunity to share some of these responses on the chat with each other, and it's a great learning experience as well. I'm going to direct this next question to Sean. It's another question from Eileen, which is very popular. With business picking up for some companies, hiring ramps up, but how do we ensure that new joiners are inducted well virtually? So this is actually a really good question.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was having a hard time because, you know, just recently under Armour, we just hired a new batch of management trainees. And, you know, ideally, we want to have a very positive and nice onboarding experience for all new hires, fresh graduates, you know, coming out of school, first job, excited. But unfortunately, some of them have to immediately start working from home, you know, on their first day. So how do we actually facilitate that, you know, while staying in compliance with the law, right, with the government advisory? So that was really a tough a challenge for us. So what we did was really about a lot of engaging before the official first day, because before they start, we don't have to operate on the split team. So what we can do is really to meet them, you know, in groups of 5, of course, you know, we're not outside the limit. So what we did was to really hold a lot of meet and greet sessions with our leaders, with HR, going through orientation, going through, you know, with the direct bosses, with the peers, and including sharing a little bit more about the brand, what it represents, some of the core values, brand attributes, and all that. At the same time, we prepared a very nice welcome pack, you know, for everyone, which includes a very uniquely designed, you know, T-shirt only for employee. Our motto called "Through This Together." So it's also actually aligned and resonates with our Under Armour motto. And at the same time, you know, our very hugely in demand, you know, this sports mask. So we also provided them, like what Daniel mentioned earlier, you know, it's safety, it's concern. So I think that is something that we also want to ensure. So never mind if they can't experience the full office setup and atmosphere, but at the very least, we want them to have a very welcoming kind of onboarding experience. So that is what we did. And moving forward, I do see similar challenges as because we don't expect, you know, phase 3 or, you know, office return to happen anytime soon. So I think all of us must be prepared to continually think of, you know, more creative ways on how do we want to do onboarding. Yeah. So that's my little suggestion.
Thanks for that. Are there any other perspectives? I think I'm just looking at the time and conscious of that. We've got about 10 more minutes. So I will probably take another couple more questions, but if there are any other ideas that you want to riff on, please feel free to jump in. Michael or Daniel, you look like you're ready to.
No, Chitong, no, I mean, just to add on or echo what Sean has shared, I think onboarding is definitely important. In fact, I was reading this article statistic. In fact, 1 out of 10, you know, of the leavers, they left the organization because they did not have a proper onboarding process in a way. So despite what we are going through now, so something I strongly advocate and embrace is the virtual onboarding process should still carry on. So in fact, it was just only yesterday, I've just done one virtual onboarding to all the new joiners that have joined us for the past 2 to 3 months. And in fact, that was, I think, our second or third virtual onboarding session already. So don't lose the momentum. So don't try to think that, okay, we will only do the onboarding when things are back to normal. We can have the group size gather physically. I think that's going to take a pretty long time. So my tips and advice to everyone is start doing it. Start doing it. If you start now, in fact, you're already a little bit too late in my perspective. Yeah.
So I agree with Daniel, because the new way forward for a lot of companies is about how innovative and creative your digital engagement with your employees are going to be. And the younger generation are very digitally savvy. They're on Instagram and TikTok and so on and so forth. And only when we know how to leverage, I think, some of these newer social media tools, which all these younger digital natives are so comfortable with and having a lot of fun, communicating with their friends through these social media, that we will be able to tap into the power of how digital engagement can also just be equally effective as well, and move away from our traditional way of thinking about just face-to-face. And we really need to move towards digital engagement that is innovative and also helps to build bonds, and blend it with still, of course, some of the face-to-face aspects of engagement as well.
Thanks for that. And the next question here is from Abhishek. Maybe Michael could actually take a stab at this. Considering the new normal, should organizations relook at their policies, so performance improvement programs and perks, in terms of R&R? So what are some of the things we should consider while reframing? And I think somewhere in the chat, someone is asking also whether we predict that benefits will be tailored more towards virtual working, like transport allowances, for example, being changed to some kind of functional allowance, which allows people to support costs that are related to working from home. So have you seen this in the companies that you've spoken to?
Well, I've seen related issues, maybe not so much to do with perks and so forth, but people angsting around confirming people in position, for example, and asking whether, because the person was onboarded virtually, should we actually require them to spend another month before we confirm them in position. And of course, different people have different views on that. I think what it boils down to is having a really good and honest conversation amongst the senior leaders of the team to figure out, or I should say the company, to figure out what the sensible policy will be, because it could be very different for different companies, and it could be very situational, I think. So you probably have to figure out what is comfortable for your company, and then make sure that everybody is singing to the same song sheet. So it's not an answer to the question about should we change perks and so forth, but it's a related question, which is around policy and procedure.
Okay, again, sorry, just mindful of time. Last two questions. This one from Mervin. Based on survey results, most employees are seeking flexible working arrangements. Are managers or companies willing to accommodate this? Or how do we manage the situation where companies prefer workers to be back in the office and are not willing to offer this flexibility once the government stops advising people to work from home? I think, yeah, maybe I'll open this up to Sean, Patricia, Daniel, if you have any comments on this.
So I think I'll just chime in. I think it is a progressive conversation, and maybe this is an opportunity for Engage Rocket also to work closely with your clients. And what we are seeing, or at least my personal view of seeing what the most progressive companies have. I've seen some of the tech startup companies already in their careers page or the culture portion of their company talk about how they are progressing as a company and their remote work policy. And they said with COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, this is how our company is going to operate, and this is going to be our culture moving forward. And they stated very clearly about how they're going to be flexing about work and what they want to see in terms of their vision about remote work. And they let their employees and also potential employees who are interested to join their company and culture know that there will be these flexible work arrangements even post-COVID-19. And I think these companies are very progressive because they're very clear already about their vision, how they're operating now during COVID-19 and how they want to operate post-COVID-19. And why they take so much passionate interest is because they really want to protect their culture of their people, the norms and so on, the shared values, the shared success at this present time to keep their employees extremely engaged, and also to think about the future of work, where it's different modes of learning and employees can choose between different arrangements in terms of the percentage of time that they will go, for example, to the office for face-to-face, and the percentage of time that they'll be working from home, and what are the policies that would support the employees that are working from home, including the benefits and having their home office and so on. What are those arrangements and schemes as employee benefits? So this is what I'm seeing in terms of the most progressive organizations. I'm really very inspired by what they're doing because they're thinking about their culture and they're thinking about their future work right now, and they're making it very explicit in terms of how they're operating as an organization, how their culture is going to be now and also post-COVID-19.
Thanks for that. And just in the interest of time, Sean, sorry to cut you off, but maybe you go ahead. It looks like you've got something to share. We can spare a few more minutes.
Right, I just make it a really quick one. I believe there are two considerations to this. It depends really on the nature of the work that we're talking about, and of course the conditions that we are expected to operate in. Because I'm assuming that if the government allows us all of us to return to office, it must be relatively safe environment for us to go back. So what I would like to really highlight is, before COVID-19, flexible working arrangement has been a competitive advantage used by a lot of employers to attract talents, right? So I think moving forward, it may not just become simply a competitive advantage. It may be just a necessity for people really to think about, and for employers and companies to think about whether do we want to offer that flexible work arrangement option to people, because this may somewhat fall under their expectation already when they are looking for jobs. Yeah.
So it's like a table stakes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this last question to all the panelists that we have here. Maybe we can respond like Michael first, then Daniel, and then Patricia, and then Sean. And within 30 seconds, right? If you have one tip for leaders that are preparing their workforce for the coming quarters ahead, what would that tip be? What would you advise them to do? Like just one very quick tip for them, 30 seconds.
I think try to communicate as often and as clearly as you can, and apply the keep it simple strategy.
Communicate often, clearly, and keep it simple. I like it. Daniel?
Hey, in fact, I think Michael read my mind. I want to mention communication also. Yeah, and it's true. I think ultimately, no matter what size in terms of organization, communication is the key. If you can't communicate your strategy, your direction, no one will follow. I think I don't want to be different. I think I'll echo what Michael had mentioned. Yeah.
Wonderful. Patricia?
Yeah, I think that for me, my one tip for companies to meet that fast changing world that we are in now is the theme of actually today's webinar and what the good work that Engage Rocket have been deep diving into. And it's continuing to go deep about resilience and meeting the unknown of the future about resilience through curiosity, through courage, through compassion. Going deeper into these areas together with the organization is going to be very key moving forwards to our leaders.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Sean.
Well, my advice for leaders is really about trust, having enough trust in people, because I believe that trust is mutual. If an employee feels that you have enough trust in him or her, I will deliver. I will respond, equally positive, to the trust that you have placed in me. On the contrary, if there's no trust, I think there's going to be a very severe lack of collaboration. There's a lot of time wasted on justifying, on questioning. So I really think that trust will be really essential and critical during this period.
So wonderful. So if I might summarize, communicate, keep it simple, go deep on resilience, curiosity, courage, compassion, and work hard to build trust as a leader. Those are great takeaways. On behalf of the Engage Rocket team and all of our audience here today, very, very big thank you to our distinguished panelists, Patricia, Michael, Daniel, Sean. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and your insights. A big thank you also to IHRP and SHRI, Mayank and Alvin. They have been amazing partners in putting all of this research together and sharing that with the audience here. Now, the last thing that I have to say is that please do request for the slides in the post-event survey. We'll make sure to send those to you. Yeah, with all of that, I'd like to thank all of you as well for spending the last 90 minutes with us. I hope you've gotten many, many takeaways from the wealth of experience that was shared today. Once again, my name is Chitong, and this has been one of Engage Rocket's webinars, The Resilience of the Singapore Workforce Through the Crisis of a Generation. Thank you all very much, and see you all again soon.